Hello and welcome to 321 on RedBullIndianapolisGP.com. On this edition, I met up with the Speedway's historian and we talked about Cannonball Baker, an old-school motorcycle racer whose name many associate with the Cannonball Run race from the 70s.
Okay, I'm here in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame Museum with IMS historian Donald Davidson. Donald, what can you tell me about Cannonball Baker? He, of course, won the first motorcycle race here in 1909 and competed in the 1922 Indianapolis 500. But what else do we need to know about Cannonball Baker?
Well, what he was most famous for was making cross-country trips when it was very difficult to do. And I'm not even sure how many he made, but I mean it was like probably 30 or 40. And he did it on motorcycles, and he did it for various automobile companies when it was a major challenge to get from one coast to the other, because a lot of the roads weren't developed yet. And the earliest one that he did was probably, I'm just getting maybe 1911, 1912, somewhere in there, and he was still doing it into the late 30s. I'm not sure if he did one after the war or not. But anyway, he was from Indiana. He wasn't born in Indianapolis, but he did move here when he was quite young.
Okay.
And when he raced here in 1909, he didn't have the name Cannonball yet. He was E.G. Baker, Irwin George. Apparently he didn't like either name, so he went by E.G. And but then shortly after that, and he did race. He raced flat track, but what he began doing was these cross-country runs. And in 1914, he arrived in New York City, and it was a journalist, I don't remember what the newspaper was now, but he had just done this trip in, 11 days or whatever it was, and he was considered as fast as the Cannonball Express, which was a famous train in those days, and so this newspaper writer referred to him as Cannonball, and he liked that, and so he assumed the name, and that's what he used for the rest of his life.
Okay. He kind of had a connection with Indian his entire life. That's what he completed most of his cross-country trips on, and he competed on an Indian here in 1909. Yeah. How did that connection come about, or what can you tell us about his Indian connection?
I'm not sure how it started, but it was a very famous make. I mean, now, you think of Harley Davidson, but right. At one time, I wouldn't be too certain that Indian wasn't better known than Harley Davidson, and then certainly for many, many years they were great rivals. And evidently he just endeared himself to management quite early on. And in fact, one of the bikes, in fact, that we have on display is one that he made one of his cross-country runs on.
Okay.
And it had I'm not a gearhead, but it had a rotary valve setup that he designed himself, and it's a little difficult to really describe what the bike is, because it's an Indian chassis with a Harley Davidson engine, but with the Cannonball Baker modification on it. Down here in front is the photograph of the lineup of one of the races. In fact, this is the FAM Amateur Championship, and this is Baker right here.
Okay.
And there he is and I don't know that this is the same bike, but it's a comparable bike. And we've had one on display for many years in the museum that's not on display right now because it's been freshened up so that they can run. But there are a couple of other Indians that are fairly similar in appearance, except that they've got the regular handlebars. His racing bike would have drop handlebars, but if you could just change the handlebars, it wouldn't be too different from these two here.
So he had a 1909 Indian, a brand new Indian, when he competed here at the Speedway?
Yes.
And this motorcycle here is a 1910, and as you mentioned, very similar.
Yeah, and then the other one is a little bit later. I think that's a 1918, but these are not racing bikes.
Okay. And of course, we are going to have the 1909 Indian reappear here in the near future.
Yes.
At the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. More to come on a future installment of 321.